What's up, Jets fans? Welcome to the latest edition of Jets Latest, where you get the latest on the Jets, Jets. I'm your host, the spitting statistician, Dane Martinez, and today we look ahead to the Week 2 matchup against the Buffalo Bills. And honestly, the way I'm viewing this is it's unstoppable forces against movable objects. I mean, you've heard the idea of the unstoppable force against the immovable object, right? Well, I don't think that is going to be the case here when the Jets take on the Bills in Week 2. And by the way, remember, thank you so much to everybody who has been come down with Jets Latest. If you want to become a Jets Latest insider, click on the link there in the description. You can get access to exclusive content. You can get certain perks out there. I will also hook you up in fantasy football and sports betting and help you win your leagues and win that cash. But like I said, when we are taking on the Bills in Week 2, I think there are, unfortunately, and then fortunately, mismatches on either side of the ball. Let's start when Buffalo has the ball. I'm going to be a little bit worried about Josh Allen and that passing game. Now, in Week 1, Josh Allen led the NFL with 394 yards against the Baltimore Ravens, okay? He also was throwing the ball downfield. He threw the ball on 20-plus air yards 8 times and completed 5 of them. Both of those were the highest mark in the NFL last week. And we know about the Jets. We know about how Aaron Rodgers was able to kind of slice and dice them up a little bit, despite being on the run for some of those. And that 73% completion rate against them was in the bottom 10 in the league. It was 7th worst in the NFL. So this to me becomes the area where Buffalo is going to attack, right? They are going to go after the non-sauce elements of this secondary, and I think Josh Allen has the ability to go deep against this secondary as well. To me, this is red alert for Brandon Stephens. I would not be surprised if we see a little bit more Azareye'h Thomas, our third-round pick out of Florida State. Also, Tony Adams, red alert. And by the way, some people in the comments, you're right, I said Adrian Amos a couple of times, had him on my brain as another different safety. No, Tony Adams I didn't think played that well. I wouldn't be surprised to see Malachi Moore, our other draft pick out of Alabama, involved, because this is going to be the linchpin. I think we can stop the run just fine, but that secondary outside of sauce can be had, and a matchup against Josh Allen, who leads the league in passing and can go downfield, is certainly not the best matchup to have. On the bright side, though, when we have the ball, I think there is also a mismatch. This time on the ground, the Jets' run game looked really good, and also the Bills couldn't stop the run. Look, the Bills allowed the Ravens to run for 238 yards on Sunday. They allowed 8.2 yards a carry, mostly from Derrick Henry and, of course, the dual threat quarterback of Lamar Jackson, right? They also gave up 10 what we call explosive runs. Those are runs for 10 or more yards, right? And Derrick Henry now leads the league with 169 yards rushing. And here's the deal. I made the comparison to the Philadelphia Eagles, right? The run game with the dual threat quarterback. Obviously, the Baltimore Ravens are similar. The run game with the dual threat quarterback. I've been talking here on Jets Latest about how the run game can still play in 2025, how Aaron Glenn believes in that. I gave you teams like Philly, like Washington with a run game and Jaden Daniels, like Baltimore, and how all those teams actually made the playoffs last year running with the effectiveness that the Jets are striving for, and quite frankly, what the Jets had in Week 1, right? So look at this. Breece Hall, I talk about Derrick Henry leads the league at 169 yards rushing. Well, Breece Hall is third in the NFL with his 107 yards in Week 1. And the Jets as a team ran for 182 yards in Week 1. That was 4th best in the NFL, right? So again, the unstoppable force, this time the Jets run game, against the movable object, the Bills run defense. But unfortunately on the Bills side, they've got the Bills pass offense as the unstoppable force against the Jets pass defense as the movable object. I do think we're going to be able to run the ball. We continue to show that that is going to be the identity. And quite frankly, the other benefit of that, and this is something that we continue to preach here with Aaron Glenn, is the idea of time of possession. And in a game against Josh Allen, you want to keep Josh Allen off the field as much as possible. So look for that run game once again to have a lot of volume and to have the effectiveness. The other thing I really want to keep our eye on is the idea of, well, anything becomes a movable object if we're giving it up ourselves. One of the other focus areas from Aaron Glenn all summer long has been in the penalties, being undisciplined, right? That was a focus, specifically pre-snap penalties. Aaron Glenn said after the game against Pittsburgh that he did, in fact, see some progress there. If you want to split hairs, right, we did have 7 penalties for 74 yards. However, there weren't as many kind of pre-snap penalties, the false starts, the illegal motions, that delay a game, that sort of stuff. A lot of the penalties we had were actually unnecessary roughness, unsportsmanlike conduct. If you remember John Simpson defending Justin Fields when he got hit, there were a couple of like skirmishes that broke out, right? I think Quincy would have hit out of bounds late. And Aaron Glenn draws the distinction that those are a little bit different. Those are with our identity of violence and aggression. Listen to what Aaron Glenn had to say on the pre-snap penalties. He says, last year, we led the league in false start and illegal formation penalties. We had only one of those penalties yesterday. The plan is actually working the way we want it to work. We have to continue to nip all those things in the bud. For the past 2 years, we led the league in penalties. So when you go out and you don't only have one false start penalty, our guys have been doing a hell of a job trying to fix that. We're going to continue to do that. Now, we have to get ready to focus on some of the discipline penalties that we had. We have to make sure we can't allow those things to happen. They'll force you to lose games. Like I said, 7 penalties for 74 yards. However, they only had 1 penalty for 5 yards in the first half before kind of that skirmish broke out when Pittsburgh hit Justin Fields. John Simpson ran to his kind of defense, so it's a different kind of thing, right? And Glenn is focusing on the pre-snap penalties, but I did notice in the second half, they did become a little bit less disciplined. Maybe that kind of, intensity got to them a little bit, and Pittsburgh did take advantage of that. There was also the Brandon Stevens defensive pass interference penalty that did happen in the second half. So again, something to clean up, something that's going to be a pressure spot for us all season long. The discipline and penalties, and then the turnovers, right? And we saw how it worked well. I gave the model of the Eagles, who was +1 in turnovers, helped them win a close game. We were -1 in turnovers that helped us lose a tough game, despite the ball that bounced 4 times that DK Metcalf caught, despite the 60-yard field goal, despite us, it was us dropping interceptions that could have changed the turnover margin. It was the Xavier Gipson fumble that really changed the game, right? So the penalties and the turnovers, let's keep an eye out for that as we face Josh Allen, the reigning MVP, and the Buffalo Bills in a divisional matchup in week 2. We'll see if the Bills can throw against us, if we're going to see A.Z. Thomas, if we're going to see Malachi Moore. We'll see if we can continue our success in the run game. So that'll do it for this episode of Jets Latest. Remember, like I said, click on the link, become a Jets Latest insider, get all sorts of extra access. I love engaging with you. Thank you to everybody watching the videos, liking the videos, engaging in the comments, subscribing to the channel, and telling a Jets fan friend to tell a Jets fan friend. We've got Scopio Fricanis 1, who says, Justin Fields played very well, and the defense was outstanding, but that Gibson fumble is what sealed the deal. I agree with most of it. I don't think all of the defense played outstanding. I think the secondary and pass defense, outside of Sauce, left a little bit to be desired. George Alston, 1933, a regular, shout out to George, says, no one is yet talking about how Membu was wrecking Watt and Highsmith, 2 quality veterans. Watt got pancaked and handled by the big guy. He showed power, technique, and athleticism. We've got a real one. Yesterday on Jets Latest, I talked about that. I talked about how our D-line got after Rodgers and how Membu pitched a shutout in his debut against TJ Watt, for goodness sake. So that's another reason we are encouraged by this offensive line, not only being able to run the ball, but also protecting Justin Fields for his development. And that's part of why we saw Justin Fields be so productive, quite frankly, having one of the best passing games of his career. And then shout out, as usual, Sharon McLean, one of the Jets' latest day 1 regulars. Shout out to Sharon. She coined the Glennaissance, says, optimism, true optimism. Keep preaching, minister. I think they're talking about me. Love your videos. Thank you so much to Sharon, to everybody else as we grow this Jets Latest channel. And remember, if you want to hear more from me, the spitting statistician Dane Martinez, I am the host of the FTN Fantasy Show over on SiriusXM channel 87, the fantasy channel, giving you all sorts of insights to help you win your leagues and win that cash. FTN is a great website, waiver wire tool, rankings, stats hub, all sorts of data to help you, content to help you be a better fantasy player and a better sports bettor. And I also do in-game live shows on a network called Sports Grid. Live betting is all the rage. If you want help there, you could watch me as a second screen experience while you're watching the games to go ahead and get some cash, all right? But we will be back tomorrow continuing to talk about the matchup against the Buffalo Bills, what I am looking for. But for this episode of Jets Latest, we out of here. Peace.